Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy, and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health, one topic at a time. So, first of all, I am so glad to be back. I know all the common wisdom is that when you start with this YouTube thing, you just do video after video and it's a quantity thing. And I got to tell you, we had a cold come through our house that was like crazy. Okay, and I love when my kids come home. The kids came home, they brought friends. I love when they bring friends, but every one of these kids had a cold. Okay, so I'm back from the dead and it feels good to feel good again. And so after my last video, which was about the article in the New England Journal of Medicine touting the benefits of intermittent fasting, I got a lot of feedback and requests to elaborate a bit more on the benefits, the individual benefits of intermittent fasting. Today, I just want to limit the topic to how intermittent fasting might address the issue of mobilizing stored fat. Okay, so first of all, my usual disclaimer, I am not recommending intermittent fasting to anybody. I'm not making any individual medical recommendations on this channel, but rather I want to help you to understand the facts so that you can make a good informed decision for yourself, and more importantly, have an informed conversation with your own healthcare provider. In my mind, that's sort of the cornerstone of being your own advocate, is to be able to be a partner. I'm going to give a shout out to Being Nancy. She contacted me to let me know that she is going to be starting intermittent fasting. I'm going to link her channel below. I believe she's going to document her experience intermittent fasting on YouTube, and she's one of the people that's asked me to elaborate a bit. So, intermittent fasting and mobilizing stored fat. So, well, what is the purpose of stored fat, right? Nobody wants it. Why do we have it? Well, to understand why you so readily store fat, you have to understand that the human body was not made to only live in the conditions that we're so lucky, most of us, to live in today, okay? The body was really designed to be able to not only survive, but thrive in conditions of far more adversity, right? So years ago, if you had to like hunt and gather for yourself, for example, there were periods of famine. There might have been periods of inclement weather where you couldn't get out there and hunt for yourself, where your hunt wouldn't be successful, your gathering wouldn't be successful. You might have been the prey of another predator and you'd have to run for an extended period of time, even when you were hungry. So historically, the people that were able to store fat were really the people that survived the best, okay? But fast forward to today, where we live with excess and everything is in abundance. There is no scarcity of food in our culture. We have stockpiles of food. We have refrigeration. We have grocery stores. We have mass transit. We have the option to live a very sedentary life. So in this case, and today, too much stored fat is not translating into longevity at all. Too much stored fat has created other problems, disease, obesity, diabetes, and all kinds of things. And now we can start to explore how we might get rid of that. And intermittent fasting, in my opinion, is really the best way to address mobilizing stored fat. So when you want to lose weight, it's important to understand the different metabolic options that your body has when it needs to procure energy. So simply put, there are basically three ways that your body can procure energy at all. One is the easiest, and that is to use the glucose that's circulating around as blood sugar, we call it. So when you're hungry, your blood sugar is whatever is its baseline. You eat a meal, a couple hours later, your blood glucose is a little higher, and that glucose doesn't have to be converted at all. So it's not very biologically costly to use it. We secrete insulin, which encourages the glucose to get into the cells. The cells will use the glucose just as is, and it's just a very simple process, and it's what the body will choose first. If that's not enough energy and the body still needs more, then it will move on to the second metabolic pathway, and that is to metabolize glycogen. Glycogen is stored in the muscles and in the liver, and it is converted into glucose. So that's a little more biologically costly than using glucose just straight, because anytime the body has to make a conversion, there's an expenditure of energy there. So that will be the second option. The body will use some glycogen stores, convert that glycogen into glucose, and then again, the cells will be able to use that glucose. And then after many hours, because you have many hours worth of glycogen stored, a few hours in your muscles, many more hours in the liver. And only after that, the body will tap into stored fat, okay? Because tapping into stored fat is the most biologically costly way to procure energy. But once the liver sends the message, it's about 80% down on the glycogen stores, the body will switch and it will start to tap into that stored fat. So if you understand this, then it's easy to start to see the wisdom in fasting and having a period of fasting. And it's easy to see how the timing can impact whether you procure fat for energy. Okay, so then the question is, well, how much time? How much time do you need? The big question is, how much time does it take to deplete the glycogen stores out of the liver? Well, it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video just because that is hugely variable. If you are an elite athlete, which I assume you're not or you wouldn't even be interested in this video, it won't be very long. But for most of us, the rule of thumb is, a few rules of thumb, is that the liver stores upwards of 1,800 calories of glycogen in it at a time. Another rule of thumb is that, after about 2 to 4 hours, your muscles have used up about 80% of their stored glycogen. That switches to the liver. And when the liver gets down to having used about 80% of its glycogen, that's when it switches over to fat metabolism. Hours-wise, the rule of thumb is, I've read many, but from what I've read, 12 hours is the absolute minimum before you start to make that switch. So I'm going to get into exactly what my journey was like and how I got started with intermittent fasting in a different video. But just to get started, I will say that according to the New England Journal of Medicine and most everything that I have read, the sweet spot is about 18 hours. 16 to 18 hours is it. 18 is probably better. That should be your period of fasting if you are going to practice time-restricted eating. I personally use an 18-hour window 6 days a week. So that means 6 days a week, there's just a 6-hour period during which I get any of my intake that I'm going to have for the day. It's usually about 11:30 to 5:30 or 12 to 6, somewhere in there. I don't recommend that anybody start out with that, especially if you're somebody who eats first thing in the morning, maybe 7 in the morning, and the last time you eat is 9 o'clock at night and you're used to this 14-hour window. I just think it's going to be too hard and discouraging, and I think it's more likely than not you'll quit. So I'm not recommending that anybody start with that, but I do think, just from my own experience and what I'm reading, particularly in that last article that I featured in my previous video, it might be a good idea to just start with 12. You won't get all the fat burning benefits, but you will start to get used to the process of intermittent fasting so that then you can go further, which will be the topic of a future video. But I started out with a 16-hour window. I will say it worked for me, but it was extremely hard. Okay, but at this point, I'm in the 18-hour window and I like it very much. I don't see any reason why I won't continue it for the rest of my life. There are so many benefits beyond the fat burning. And again, I'll go into each of those in separate videos if people want me to. So that said, I hope that this was helpful. I hope it helped you understand how the timing can make a difference. I know that it flies in the face of what we were told, like in the early 1980s. Keep your blood sugar steady and keep eating all day, and that keeps your metabolism up, and that doesn't let your blood glucose go down. I think I have dug very deep, and I have looked as hard as I can. I can't find any science behind that. I think it was a concept that grew legs. Now, if you are eating with that kind of a regimen and it's working for you and you don't have much stored body fat, everything's fine. I don't have a quarrel with it. I will say that you might want to still explore, look into intermittent fasting, just because you might not be getting some of the other benefits that you could get. Maybe you don't have to lose weight, but maybe you have an autoimmune disease you're struggling with or some other inflammatory condition. There might be any number of benefits that you could get from time-restricted eating that you might want to know more about. So if you do, we'll talk about it another time. And until then, thanks. See you next time. And nice to be back.